So, previously, the ponies of Ponyland had set up camp in a luscious forest clearing found that morning by the Pegasi Scouts. After a hiccup involving an overstocked fire, the various baby ponies were put to bed and the adults had dined. Other than Danny and Gusty, who had accepted responsibility for the aforementioned hiccup and who are now engaged in washing up as penance, we find the ponies now sated, sitting on log seats that form a ring around a campfire that blazes merrily. Now that furry stomachs are full, thoughts are beginning to turn to the final activity before bedtime, campfire stories.
Paradise, please tell us a story. Last time I had the most wonderful dreams about that place.
A husky, soft-spoken, pale blue muffin-marked earth pony begins, but she hesitates, blushing.
Where was it again?
Marlet, sweet stuff.
Magic Star answers.
And remember the story about poor Tessie? That was wonderful too.
She adds, the quiet mare's usual delicacy giving way to her enthusiasm. Yeah, Paradise, your stories are the best, Cherry's Jubilee says earnestly. Rare praise from the boisterous earth pony. The white Pegasus absorbs this praise with an expression of equanimity.
Thanks, gals. I would love to, but...
she says with a mysterious wink to Masquerade.
maybe someone else should go first.
Thus redirected, the attention of the story-hungry ponies turns to others.
Again, I did so enjoy the story you told us about that funny mare Bathsheba.
Sundance encourages, snout resting on the aforesaid's lap. Megan stifles a yawn, tired from the busy day and recent events.
I don't know if I can right now, Sonny,
Megan says.
but I would like to hear one of your tales about the Bright House.
In another part of the log seat ring, an unlikely request is made by the dignified wind whistler.
Ribbon, I do find your stories about Equestria to be quite excellent.
She begins, but is cut off by a snigger from Firefly.
For full? You like that? Seriously?
The feisty Pegasus challenges. The motherly pony Ribbon gives the latter a wry smile as her horn lights up.
Oh, yes.
She says, in a sugary sweet tone.
Fairy tales are just for the foes, unlike Dennis. Shimmer fights Skeletor comic, which is for big, strong warriors.
Firefly blushes as the telepathic abilities of the unicorn reveal her secret.
No fair.
She grumbles.
Anyway, while I would adore regaling you all with a ponytail after the day's events, I just couldn't do it justice.
Ribbon declines, with an apologetic look to Wind Whistler.
However, Paul was saying me such a delightful tale about her garden on the way here.
She suggests, volunteering the meek fellow foal-sitter beside her. Thanks to the suggestions from Ribbon and Megan, the attention around the fire turns to Sundance and Posy, who, as Paradise continues to be reticent, are soon being entreated on all sides. However, both shy ponies wilt in the heat of their interest. Sundance is the first to decline, mumbling into Megan's green dress-suited lap that she can't think of a story. Megan leans over the pile of pink mane on her lap and whispers into its furry white ear.
Go on, I know you can do it, and we'll all love to hear it.
But the bundle merely shakes its head, and Megan feels the frightened filly tremble.
Oh, Sonny.
Megan sighs, looking a little crestfallen, an expression shared by Fizzy and a number of other furry faces round the fire, but she doesn't press the issue. As Posy continues to hesitate, Megan offers another suggestion to shift the attention of the group away from the trembling pony in her lap.
How about the first pony with a story to tell goes first?
Practically before Megan completes her sentence, a pink Pegasus with a 3-tone blue, green, red mane excitedly raises her hoof.
Me. One. Yes, I do. Got a story right here. Thought of it during summer. You'll all really enjoy it. It's for all ages, all genres. Yup.
The excitement of the proposer is not matched by her companions. Though the tolerant nature of the herd naturally inclines towards being supportive, there are a few groans, notably among the boisterous ponies and the scouts.
Are you sure, Wizard?
Galaxy asks doubtfully, trying as gently as possible to dissuade the Pegasus. Not to be put off, the aforementioned simply nods furiously in response, leaping to her hooves and eager to begin. Megan shares a worried look with Galaxy, but eventually assents.
Thank you.
She begins to say, but the rest of her sentence is drowned out as the pony storms into her tail. Whizzer starts well enough, setting out ideas that had come to her while they were engaged in putting out the fire earlier. The ponies assembled on the log seats perk up their fuzzy ears to catch the words spilling from the mouth of the eager Pegasus. It soon becomes apparent, however, that the ambition of the tale is grander than any mere campfire yarn as the filly hurries the herd at breakneck speed through a cast of no less than 20 characters. She is at pains to point out that certain of these characters, not all of whom are named directly or consistently, are not ponies. She describes 2 as Zardachars who breathe fire and have scaly wings, while another cluster are squirt eels and yet are also somehow tortoise blasters who breathe water and have hard shells. To this core cast are added cameo appearances of many more characters, some of whom are ponies, while others are creatures with mystical powers, from storm-wielding choo-choo picks to wind-blasting sparrow spikes. After this introduction, which she manages to cram into just a couple of minutes, Whizzer embarks on a plot which mixes elements of high fantasy, detective story, drama, fairy tale, and romance. Each of the themes is associated with a different villain, 5 in all. She blends these together with moral messages of honour, forgiveness, loyalty, sensibility, and tolerance. As the third subplot of the second alternative ending is embarked on, in as many minutes, a hum of confused questions breaks out.
Rabbit, or is that Roger?
Fizzy wonders aloud.
So did they defeat the dragon with the horn of the basilisk, or the basilisk with the dragon's horn?
North Star ponders.
Did Hamlet kill Rosencrantz and got his hooves, or was it Macbeth?
Medley muses.
Was it that Juliet poisoned herself because she found Podio with Masquerudio?
Asks a pink Pegasus called Heartthrob, who is dressed in heart pajamas and whose fluffy white-slippered hoof is raised as she tries to get Whizzer's attention. As the confused murmurs increase in volume, the storyteller, becoming agitated, raises her voice and speeds up still more. This process leads cyclically to louder murmurs until Whizzer can barely be heard above the din. Eventually Surprise, one of the few ponies to keep up with Whizzer's story, but who had become visibly more and more confused the longer it went on, leaps to her hooves.
Make it stop! Won't someone please make it stop?
She yells, before raising a hoof to her brow and comically flopping backwards over her log seat and landing in a feathery heap away from the fire. As she does so, the other sillier ponies, Applejack, Fizzy, and Sundance, burst into fits of laughter, to be joined in due course by the white Pegasus herself. Soon, general laughter breaks out around the campfire, until even Megan and the more responsible ponies are struggling to keep straight faces. Wind Whistler, however, ever a paragon of self-control and sensitive to the crestfallen expression on Whizzer's glistening blue chromatic gem-eyed face, rises sternly, her expression hushing the tittering ponies.
This is Mawsome Cat. Surprise, apologize to Wizard.
Yes.
Surprise rises, still giggling a little, and approaches Whizzer contritely, stuffing her mouth with her wing feathers to avoid further outbursts that might offend the speedster. Once she is close, with a hiccuping guffaw, she skips forward to the loquacious pink Pegasus and cuddles her affectionately.
Say thank you, everyone, for the story. It was a wonderful effort.
Wind Whistler states, after a moment's hesitation, mindful of her fellow flyer's feelings. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Wizard.
Thank
Wizard.
you, Wizard. The crowd chorus politely. Wizard tries to say that she isn't finished, but her mouth is suddenly full of Surprise's blonde mane as a smaller Pegasus' puffy curl pushes into her face. Wizard gently pushes the huggy little Pegasus away to continue her story. However, as she does so, she feels a strange pulling at the base of her four-tone red, dark green, light dark blue tail. Too late does Wizard realise that the mischievous pony has turned the hug into a game of steal the tail ribbon.
Hey!
Wizard squeaks as she feels her ribbon come away.
Catch me if you can.
The silly white Pegasus challenges in a sing-song voice, leaping into the air giggling, waggling the scrap of white fabric in her hoof. With a grin, Wizard, always up for an aerial chase, streaks into the darkness and is soon abreast of her much slower opponent. However, just as she is about to seize the purloined ribbon, the slippery, agile pickpocket whisks it away. As her manic speed causes Wizard to overshoot, the chase continues with Surprise's tail wriggling eel-like away in the smoky night air, the latter's own red ribbon fluttering enticingly atop her receding withers. The ponies below shake their heads in amusement as the two Pegasi disappear into the night.
But what did Cash and do next?
Wonders Twilight, gazing up at them, wanting to see the tale to its end. The sentiment of the curious unicorn is not, however, shared by many round the fire, where the consensus of relieved raised ears suggests a general contentment that the chaotic story be left unfinished. In the lull, Ribbon nudges Posy, who starts nervously. The ears and eyes of the ponies, glowing brightly against the darkness of the post-dusk clearing, turn towards the Yellow Earth pony.
If you're sure she's finished.
Posy says tremulously, looking down at her hooves. So the audience, unintentionally invited to do so by the latter's reticence, grow restive. A few ponies yawn from the day's exertions, and the less sensitive ponies among them, notably Cherry's Jubilee and Paradise, begin to grumble about the delay. Firefly, less than thrilled by the suggestion that Posy deliver a tale, whispers something in Medley's ear, prompting the other to roll her eyes. Both of them steal sly glances at the unfortunate Earth pony, causing the latter to shrink down further onto her log seat, where she cowers in a state of involuntary percipience, struggling to collect her thoughts. She stutters helplessly, a tightness in her chest causing the words to sound at a pathetic high pitch. Unable to bear the attentions of the ponies before her, Posy looks away from the circle into the blackness of the forest around. As she does so, the scene before her seems to dissolve, replaced by an image of her garden bower at sunrise. Her ears fill with the gentle sound of the trees, and her nostrils flare as they take in, seemingly, the heavy scent of morning dew. Ribbon, who had conjured the image with her telepathic unicorn power, sounds her voice in Posy's mind.
Deep breaths now.
Posy steadies herself, releasing her constricted chest. The muttering ceases as Posy decisively clears her throat, forgetting the audience before her as she commits to the image of her plants, which form the basis of her tale. The ponies lean in as a soft-spoken, pink-maned pony begins to weave her story.
My tale begins with a group of gentle folk who live in a forest clearing, much like this one.
Posy gestures to the rustling dim shapes of the creaking trees around them.
Now this group was led by the proud Rose family, supported by the sister families of Hefty Heather and Bountiful Berry.
Posy, gaining confident as the long-dwelled-upon characters of her plants rise in her mind's eye, goes on to explain that this happy collective was threatened by crooked families of brutes, the nasty nettles, brash buttercups, and backsliding brambles. As the shy pony gets into her stride, she rises from her crouched position to stand boldly on her log seat.
Birch is known for his beauty.
She says, directing the gazes of the ponies to the delicate white of the distinctive trunks just visible in the moonlight around.
While Ash is known for his gentle strength.
She points towards a cluster of the respective trees, but their identity is lost in the dim arboreal purlieu.
Nightlight, please could you use your unicorn power to...
She stops as the respective trees have already been lit up by the glowing horn of a deep blue star-marked unicorn.
Thank you, dear.
Posy smiles at her friend. Posy continues to describe how Birch and Ash tried to help Rose's family, while ferocious fir and cruel cypress, the trees of which are illuminated in turn, support Nettle's brood. At the climax of Posy's tale, Master Nettle takes Madame Rose hostage and demands that she and the leaders of the Heather and Berry families leave the clearing. In a voice heavy with real emotion, Posy relates how Mrs. Heather, desperate to free Madame Rose, approaches an evil witch who gives her a poison to use against the Nettle family.
Mrs. Heather gingerly holds the poison bottle in her strong hoofs.
Posy grimaces as she thinks back to the many invasions staged against her innocent vegetables by this particular garden bully.
Its evil scent sickens her, and she almost throws the corrupt brew away, but thoughts of Madame Rose, trapped and unable to bud.
Posy hesitates.
Unable to breathe.
She corrects herself.
Drive her to approach Nettle's estate, which borders her own.
Posy explains that Nettle Estate was choked with his numerous brood, who peek out at the dignified Mrs. Heather from the chaos of polluted soil and broken glass which they chose to live in. In the midst of this baleful scene is Madame Rose, tied up next to the ugly gargoyles of Nettle Manor, but Master Nettle himself is nowhere to be seen. There is a hush from the audience round the fire, who are mostly engaged with Posy's tale, with some exceptions, including the mutually whispering Firefly and Medley.
Beautiful Madame Rose sees what straits Mrs. Heather had been driven to.
Posy says, voice shaking, not with anxiety for herself as before, but for her characters, and by extension, the plants of her own garden, for this was a tough decision she had recently had to make when weeding.
Even though she was captive and might die, Madame Rose held up her head, brilliant red mane blazing, and said,
Posy clears her throat.
No.
Her feathery voice attempts to imitate a regal tone, befitting, in her view, her garden's queen. Posy explains that Madame Rose would prefer to remain in Master Nettle's grip than see Mrs. Heather harm another on her behalf. Mrs. Heather is conflicted and hesitates, and just at that moment Master Nettle, who had been informed by his spies of Mrs. Heather's incursion, clatters into Nettle Manor in his carriage. With his wiry strength, he seizes the poison from Mrs. Heather.
With a sly grin, he gloats over Mrs. Heather.
Posy coughs as she tries to do a low, monster-like voice.
Grr, I'm evil, and I will hurt your family. Grr.
She says. The poor monster impression causes a few winces, and Medley gives a sarcastic snort in response to a whisper from Firefly. Posy, though, is too wrapped up in the story to care that her impression has not been entirely well received, and she pushes on to describe that Master Nettle drives immediately around to Mrs. Heather's house and upends the poison on it. Posy blinks back tears as she describes that almost immediately Mrs. Heather's beautiful family begins to wither, growing thin and pale. Over the next days, it seems like all of the Heather clan would pass away, but somehow they did not.
Everyone expected Master Nettle to finish Heather off and throw all the good families out of the clearing.
Posey says seriously.
But he had not been careful with the weed killer.
She checks herself.
Poison, I mean. And you see,
She continues.
you must always be careful where the water is draining if you have to resort to such brutish methods.
She looks up expectantly. The ponies look back at her, a little confused by the turn, momentarily uncertain whether they were hearing a lecture on gardening or a campfire story.
So, what happened to Master Nettle?
Twilight prompts, her curious light pink face gazing earnestly up at Posey.
Oh yes, sorry. I was back in my garden there. Well, under Heather's home, the soil was all sandy because that's where Heathers like to make their homes. And all this time, the vial of cursed poison has been passing through the sandy soil and into the moist, polluted and overloaded soils of Nettle's home, which surrounded hers.
Posey shakes her head sadly.
Soon the Nettle family became so sick that they had to relinquish Rose. Not only that, but
Posey glows with pride, thinking about her own patch of hard-grown, healthy heathers.
the hardy Heathers were able to overcome the poison, and soon they were all just as healthy as ever.
Posey skips happily on her log seat, and Magic Star similarly gives a pleased chirrup, a moiety of her glee for the story, but the greater share for her friend's happiness. Posey goes on to explain in the denouement that the magnanimous Rose family was not bitter towards Master Nettle and his brood.
Madame Rose allowed the nettles, brambles, and buttercups to live on the edge of the clearing.
The Earth Pony adds in a measured, teacherly voice with a judicious nod.
And sometimes Madame Rose even allows her children to play with little Miss Buttercup, even though she is an ally of the Nettles. Buttercups are a lot nicer without brutish nettles about,
Posey adds.
provided they are kept in check or they get everywhere.
She finishes, prompting a friendly wicker of laughter from her friend Ribbon.
The end.
Posey sighs.
Thank you for listening.
Posey gives Ribbon a special smile and thinks hard.
Thank you.
She sounds in her mind, conjuring a picture of a bouquet of roses with a white ribbon around them. Ribbon smiles, puts a hoof to her heart and nods, her own horn sparkling. In the image, a blue unicorn appears and gratefully takes the bouquet.
You're very welcome. It was a wonderful story and very beautiful.
The image says. The yellow green-maned pony Magic Star, who had earlier been braiding flowers into Posey's mane, leads the applause, which is loudest from the ponies who are usually quietest.
About your characters almost as much as you do about the plants in your garden. It was wonderful.
The latter cries. Wind Whistler, who had been wearing a look of concern during the latter part of the tale, begins.
A good story, but
She hesitates and swallows her query about the progression of the story.
I did not want it to end.
She finishes. Despite feeling that Posey's story suffered from more than a few logical inconsistencies, Wind Whistler's pink eyes had discerned at the last moment the subtly shaking heads of both Ribbon and Megan, neither of whom felt that the sensitive Earth Pony was quite ready to face criticism.
Thank you, Windlistler.
Posey smiles.
That means a lot.
Megan and Ribbon both give Wind Whistler a nod of gratitude for her restraint. As the modest clopping applause dies down, a few ponies, particularly Firefly and Medley, whose enthusiasm for the gentle, garden-based story had been the least, resume their calls for Paradise to tell a story. Danny and Gusty, who have by now rejoined the circle after completing their chores, loudly join the calls, relieved to have returned in time for one of the palm-marked Pegasus's famous tales. Whizzer, who has returned with surprise, ribbon back in place, pouts a little at the enthusiasm for Paradise, as opposed to her own story, as she settles down on her log seat. Paradise nods to Masquerade, and both Paradise and Masquerade rise, prompting murmurs of interest from the group. 2, 3.
Ponies, humans, country mares, lend us your ears.
Thank you. They begin in unison. The crowd hushes, eyes sparkling, tails tucked in for the show. Now, over the previous weeks, while the other ponies at Paradise Estate were preparing the camping trip, the White Pegasus and her golden theatrical companion had been planning their performance. The other ponies had looked on curiously as one by one Masquerade had approached them with strange requests. Many a pony had wondered what the thespian Pegasus was up to, but she had just winked her green-gemmed eyes at them and told them to wait and see. Danny and the others now understood that Masquerade had been dramatising Paradise's tale and looked to her for their cues. At a sign to Gusty, a wind blows, and Masquerade flutters her wings to create the impression of a hissing desert wind as Paradise narrates the location of her tale in the exotic, fantastical kingdom of Saddle Arabia. At a direction to Whizzer, an impression of a hubbub of angry, accented ponies is created, as Paradise explains that the ponies of the kingdom have come to petition the king of Saddle Arabia about their troubles, which all concern destruction wrought by a dragon which they say is due to the activities of a unicorn pony called Vista Star. Paradise explains that Vista made beautiful sculptures which the dragon coveted. Masquerade holds up a stick Danny had been whittling, which has a rough picture of a horse's head on it. A few of the ponies clap their hooves in admiration, and Danny gives a little bow. Paradise continues, saying that whenever Vista made a new sculpture, the dragon would not only steal that sculpture, but also ruin the homes of the other ponies. Paradise explains that the ponies are now in the throne room. Whizzer ceases her noise, and Medley and Megan join their voices to sing a choral passage. The storyteller describes the fearsome black-coated and bearded king sitting on his majestic throne of glass as he listens to the petitioners with a grim frown on his royal face. The herd rustle uncomfortably at the description until Sundance pipes up.
Is the king a pony?
Paradise, who had paused so the ponies could digest her description, immediately responds affirmatively that he is a unicorn.
But he sounds like a monster.
And Sundance replies to nods of agreement from various rainbow-coloured pony faces around the fire.
And for the Saddle Arabians to be dark as night, but just like the night, their gemmed eyes sparkle like stars.
Paradise explains, having prepared herself for this question, the coat colour having been a deliberate choice. The explanation and description satisfies the crowd, and the reference to the twinkling eyes garners an appreciative smile from Galaxy and Fizzy and the other gem-eyed ponies. Megan and Danny, however, exchange a look of bafflement. It is Megan who is first to understand the ponies' confusion.
They don't have dark coats here, not like on the farm. The ponies thought he was a monster.
She shouts across the fire to her brother, whose eyes open wide with apprehension before joining his sister in chuckling at the misunderstanding. Once the exclamations and murmurs of disquiet die down, Paradise continues, reminding the audience that the king is frowning down to subjects who are petitioning him. At this, Masquerade screws up her face, causing giggles from Fizzy and the sillier ponies in the audience. The latter beckons Danny to come forward. He says in as deep and manly a voice as the boy could manage, "Your king hears you, my subjects, and is moved. The man known as Vista Star is hereby banished from Saddle Arabia. On cue, various sounds of pony approval are mimed around the campfire circle. Wind Whistler gives a whistle of approval, as quietly as she can manage, out of respect for the sleeping foals. Hear, hear, Cherry's Jubilee rumbles.
Woohoo! Sneakily.
Busy chirrups. That's okay. The latter mimics a champagne toast by adding a mouth pop with her hoof and fizzing the water in her canteen with her unicorn power so that it bubbles out. Paradise goes on to describe that while the majority of the crowd are approving, 2 ponies towards the back of the crowd, 1 Earth pony and 1 Pegasus, are dismayed.
Poor Vista, you don't think she meant to, do you? Petal Swirl?
Paradise voices one of the dissenting characters, mimicking Surprise's high pitch before turning to Masquerade.
No, Matthew, this punishment is quite illogical.
The latter replies in role as the other dissenter, passably mimicking the logical Pegasus Wind Whistler's measured tones, setting off giggles throughout the audience and even earning a rare smile from the mare herself. Paradise narrates that Vista and her 2 friends tried to contest the finding before the king's most trusted advisors, the Council of Furbobs. Masquerade places fluffy white heart slippers, 1 on each hoof, and holds them up like puppets to more giggles.
Oh, wise Bob.
Paradise begins in her mouse fur voice.
No.
Masquerade replies in a masculine voice of a pugnacious staccato, flexing a white slipper and pushing it into Paradise's snout, which the latter wrinkles.
Let her speak.
Masquerade immediately follows up in another similar but more feminine voice, flexing her other slippered hoof so that it clutches at the first puppet to draw it back.
Bob.
Paradise turns, maintaining her squeaky mouse fur voice through the slipper in her face, while also trying not to smirk at the silliness of the scene and to ignore the ticklishness of the slipper on her nose.
Advise the king not to punish our friend Vista Star.
I agree.
Replies Masquerade, as the furbob slipper that is currently not assaulting Paradise.
No.
Masquerade bounces her other slippered hoof up and down on Paradise's red mane, simulating the bob angrily jumping on mouse fur.
Double yes.
The golden Pegasus slips her other hoof up to Paradise's head as she mimes the genial Bob attempting to restrain the angry council Bob.
Ooh.
Paradise squeaks as mouse fur.
Triple no.
Masquerade continues, and she makes a gnashing sound as her furbob puppet clutches Paradise's furry white ear, simulating it biting mouse fur.
Quadruple yes.
Masquerade rejoinders as she simulates dragging the angry Bob away. The scene over, Masquerade returns the slippers to a pink pony with hearts on her flank, heartthrob from before, to a few stomps of applause from the sillier ponies who enjoyed the puppet show. Turning to face her audience, the Pegasus continues, using the logical petal swirl voice.
We are getting nowhere with these council bobs.
Big one bit me.
Mouse moans and raises a hoof to her ear. Paradise explains that the 2 friends leave defeated, complaining about the behaviour of the Bobs. Unable to prevent it, their friend Vista Star is cast out into the desert with nobody allowed to see her on pain of joining her fate, for fear that the dragon would punish the kingdom further. She explains that Mousefur and Petal Swirl were, however, determined to see their friend in defiance of the cowardly king's edict. The Earth Pony and Pegasus travel to Vista's new home, a distant cave in the shifting wilderness of the desert sands. Gusty resumes the desert sound effect, and a pink Earth Pony, whose faded pink tail conceals a seated flank of ice cream cones, adds a soft wolf howl. as of a distant wolf pack. Paradise describes the sad scene as the three friends part company at the end of their visit.
Oh, stop! We will miss you so!
Paradise exclaims squeakily as Mousefur.
Mine own dearest Mousy.
Masquerade says in an exaggerated theatrical version of her own voice.
I too will miss you.
Masquerade replies to herself, switching her accent to the reasonable Petal Swirl voice. Paradise and Masquerade approach each other and hug. Paradise hides her white snout in Masquerade's luscious two-tone greens, while Masquerade noses herself under the former's cherry mane. Faces thus obscured, they shake to simulate crying. Seeing her cue, the pink-hearted flank pony who had provided the slippers adds a tearful sound effect. The plaintiveness of the tender pony's tears and the high emotional moment causes sniffles to break out around the log seats. Indeed, the moment proves to be too much for a few ponies, including the pony providing the wolf howl, Lickety Split, who falters. Before everyone starts crying, Masquerade gestures to Heartthrob, and the latter ceases her tears. Paradise, who was on the verge of tears herself, explains that the three friends part company with hugs and sad goodbyes, and that Mousefur and Petalswirl promise to visit when they can. Paradise pauses for a moment to allow her emotions to settle before relating to the wrapped ponies that Mousefur and Petalswirl return to visitors' homes after many weeks having passed to find that she has been kidnapped.
Oh, what's this?
Paradise says in the high-pitched use for Mousefur, pointing her golden hoof at the ground near the fire where she had previously drawn a paw print.
Must be wolves. They have taken her and eaten her up.
The revelation brings foolish gasps of "oh no" from Sundance and Fizzy.
A reasonable deduction, but there is a crucial flaw in your reasoning. There is no sign of a struggle.
Masquerade adds in her Petalswirl accent, replying to Mousefur. Paradise continues to explain that the two ponies first tracked down the wolf pack. The pink ice cream marked pony, who had previously been providing the wolf howl sound effect, now yips happily, which draws awes from the sillier ponies in the audience. The wolves turn out to be friendly, Paradise confirms, so Mousefur and Petalswirl engage them. Masquerade gives another nod to the pink pony, who woofs out.
Dragon run. I found home. That pony.
The latter buries her head in her hooves, flattens her ears, and adds a keening canine whine to give a scared doggy impression. Paradise, a better storyteller than actor, rolls her eyes and squeals out her shock in her Mousefur voice.
Oh, no!
Masquerade avoids the temptation to overact and, leaning into the level-headed nature of her character, simply hangs her head as Petalswirl reacts to the sad news. Much of the audience follows suit. The melancholy is broken by the perky voice of the pink wolf.
That pony's fine friend.
The pony sits upright, faded pink mane falling about her face, and adds tongue lolling and tail wagging for good measure.
Thank you, dear wolf.
Masquerade adds in her sober Petalswirl voice.
Yeah!
Paradise adds in the squeaky Mousefur voice. Forgetting that Mousefur is meant to be sad, Paradise leans forward and pats the pink snout of the doggy pony.
Good girl, Lickety Split.
Prompting a laugh throughout the audience and some stomps of applause for Lickety's impressive doggy act. Paradise continues the narration, relating that Mousefur and Petalswirl are led by the friendly pack to the lair of the dragon. She explains that the two friends debate whether to approach allies among the Saddle Arabian ponies for help, but that they decide against, fearful that if their plan to disturb the dragon and save their friend were revealed, the townspeople would stop them. Instead, Paradise describes Mousefur and Petalswirl sneaking what armour and weapons they can out of Saddle Arabia and travelling back to the dragon cave, thus armed to confront the beast. At a signal from Masquerade, Galaxy Applejack and Cherry's Jubilee bang their canteens to create the sound of two ponies trotting into the mountain's depth with their battle gear clanking. Paradise leans forward, snowy cherry-framed visage and hazel eyes dancing in the flames as she describes the two friends entering the dragon's lair. The more impressionable ponies in the audience, Fizzy and Sundance among them, already on the edge of their log seats, hold each other's hooves, and Surprise, next to them, nibbles her wing feathers anxiously. On the other side of the campfire, Ribbon is petting Posy, who has buried her face in her fetlocks. A bold contrast is presented by the reactions on the opposite side of the fire, where the pink and turquoise forms of Firefly and Medley are drumming their hooves in eager anticipation of the dragony confrontation. The storyteller describes the closeness of the caves that lead to the lair and the smell of sulphur that hangs in the air as the two friends breathlessly trot onward. Eventually, Paradise explains, the close passage opens out into a glorious, glittering cavern dominated by the dragon's hoard of gold, silver, and artistic treasure. Among these treasures, they recognize something that makes their hearts leap, sculptures that come from the talented hooves of their captured friend Vista Star. In the momentary pause for effect as Paradise says this, Danny holds up his now half-whittled horse-stick sculpture, eliciting further admiring murmurs from the audience. Above the hoard, Paradise continues, sitting on a huge throne of glass, there towers a monstrous red dragon. The reveal after the build-up draws squeaks of fear from the softer parts of the log ring and shrill "oh no's" from Cilia quarters. Other parts of the log circle emit gruff grunts of disquiet, and much of the utility of glass seating as at the appearance of the dragon itself. In another quarter, the monster's appearance draws an entirely opposite reaction.
Some!
Explains a grinning Firefly, nudging Northstar. This latter doesn't respond, however, as she is one of the few ponies not wrapped up in the moment, and is instead looking quizzically upward, wings shifting restlessly with the ever-present itch to fly.
Yeah, this is gonna be good.
Medley returns, giving a wry smile at the mute upturned snout of Northstar and wing-tapping Firefly over the former's pink-feathered back. Paradise, who had been taking in the various reactions with the humble inner smile of a proud craftsman, presses on to describe that at the base of the dragon's foot-long claws lies the tiny form of Vista. To relieve sighs, the story weaver explains that Vista is unharmed, but that her hind fetlocks are manacled. Paradise explains that as Mousefur and Petalswirl peer closer, it becomes apparent that the pony has her sculpting tools out and is creating another art piece for her captor.
What can we do?
Paradise stage whispers in her Mousefur voice.
Well, thinking logically, what are our options?
Returns Masquerade, using her Petalswirl voice. Even in the tense moment, the phrase is so reminiscent of Wind Whistler that both Firefly and Medley snort with laughter. The two ponies huddle back into the passageway as they debate their approach. Paradise narrates that the friends consider fighting the dragon.
We are not fast or ferocious like our friend Firefeathers.
Bemoans Paradise, looking over at Firefly, who grins back.
No as strong as our friend Cherrybeam.
Masquerade adds in her Petalswirl voice, winking at Cherry's Jubilee, who flexes a bulging foreleg and smiles.
Nor as magical as Wandwithers.
Paradise adds sadly, casting a glance at Magic Star, who blushes. Paradise narrates that after further debate, the friends recognise that violence is not the answer, as Vista could be hurt in the fray. This conclusion draws approving nods from the majority of violence-averse ponies around the campfire, with the notable exception of a grumble of
Boring.
from Gusty. The interruption is quickly shushed as Paradise describes how the friends affect the plan of action that Mousefur and Petalswirl agree upon. Firstly, she says, Mousefur sneaks up on Vista. Masquerade beckons with her hoof, but strangely no one responds. The audience gaze round in confusion in the awkward silence, and a look of worry plays briefly across Masquerade's poised features.
Guys.
The ponies spin round to look at the sudden source of the noise, which proves to be a mint-green, pink-maned earth pony on the opposite part of the fire, who is grinning triumphantly down at the now upturned and giggling form of a white Pegasus. Normally the perpetrator of astonishment, surprise's shocked expression demonstrate that the soft-hooved assailant has given her a taste of her own medicine.
You got me, Minty. Good one.
She titters from the floor. The mint-green pony holds up her hooves proudly by way of explanation for her extraordinary sneakiness, displaying the thick, mismatching socks on all four that had muffled her approach. Paradise, looking a little testily at Minty in surprise for the improvised additions, explains that Mousefur has sneakily scuttled across the horde wearing socks, just like Minty did.
But
She tusks at the still giggling pair.
Mousefur and Vista did not say surprise, because that would have alerted the dragon.
Unlike some ponies who have more socks than sense.
Masquerade adds, rolling her eyes at Minty.
Also, Vista did not fall about giggling like a silly featherbrains.
Paradise clarifies, waving a hoof at surprise. The two ponies are far from cowed by these admonitions, however, as at her first opportunity, Surprise exacts her revenge on the sock pony with a feathery tickle assault. With a squeal of laughter, Minty is soon rolling about in the dark on the dry earth behind the log seats at the mercy of the Pegasus. The silly ponies, led by Fizzy, join in the giggles, but soon stop as the rest of the audience, led by Megan, shush them. The burly earth pony, Cherry's Jubilee, gets up heavily and easily separates the two wriggling ponies, ushering back to opposite sides of the fire, both panting. Masquerade gives the impromptu usher a thankful nod and, with a quiet ahem, Paradise resumes the story, reminding the ponies that Mousefur had just approached Vista Star.
Bobbins and bodkins.
Masquerade stage whispers in her Vista voice.
Do mine dwarves astern in the flickering chateau beneath this scaly giant, the shame of mine own boom companion. Mousefur, oh how this sight stirs me to bitter joy, for thou hast put thyself in great danger on account of this poor artist.
Paradise Paradise explains that Vista's manacled hind hooves prevent her coming any closer to Mousefur, who is cowering between the dragon's huge clawed feet.
I hope they smell better than mine.
An audible mutter is heard from among the audience, originating from the mint-green sock pony from earlier, who has now removed the thick woolies and is engaged in speculatively sniffing them. Ignoring the interruption, Paradise explains that Mousefur does not approach, fearful of exciting the dragon's notice. Instead, she gives a whispered greeting from where she is and sets out to her captive unicorn friend the plan agreed with Petalswirl earlier to remove the dragon threat, that Vista should ask the dragon to leave to acquire sculpting materials. Paradise relates that Vista keeps up a show of continuing to tap away at her sculpture during the scheming, an image of a bust of the very dragon above them, so as to give the appearance that nothing is amiss to her dragon captor. Paradise explains that Mousefur scuttles back underneath the throne as Vista hails her captor.
Oh, majestic dragon lord!
Masquerade says in her Vista voice. With a nod from Masquerade, Danny replies in a deep, throaty monster voice, Yes, my jewel, how goes the work? He reads, squinting at his scrap of paper, his script in the firelight.
The wonder of thy visage requires gems of such magnificence that this humble subject's unworthy and pitiful orbs discern none at all suitable among thy mighty horde.
Vista replies, flowerily.
Roar!
At another signal from Masquerade, a blood-curdling roar from a distant part of the fire causes whinnies of fear from the timid ponies in the group, and even the normally unflappable scouts swivel their eyes around in alarm, looking for the monster. Surprised, the inexplicable origin of the roar coughs, pats her chest, and returns an innocent look to the ponies around the fire, who are now all staring at her in bemusement. Paradise explains that the dragon is angered by the delay. My hoard contains the greatest treasures for 1,000 leagues. If nothing exists that is so magnificent as to compare with the true article... Danny pauses as Paradise explains that the vain dragon peers into a huge crystal mirror above him. Then you must make do, and if you refuse to finish, I will crush you like an ant. Paradise narrates that the monster raises up one of its great feet as if to stomp on Vista, causing Mousefur, who had been hiding behind the dragon's great legs, to scuttle further away behind the throne.
Oh, great worm!
Masquerade continues as Vista.
I have heard of a wonderful jewel of glowing golden quartz that lies in the belly of the mountain of the phoenixes. Only these jewels are capable of capturing the radiance of your eyes.
The dragon, having finished reading his lines, sits down on his log seat. Paradise narrates that the beast ultimately accepts Vista's proposals, which appeals to his vanity, but that this part of Mousefur and Petalswirl's plan meets with a hitch, when rather than leaving himself to acquire the gem, as they had expected, the dragon instead says he will command a servant to do the deed. Paradise describes that the dragon taps the crystal mirror with a mighty sceptred staff, which, with a flash of magic, causes the image of a hooded pony to appear in its frame, face anonymously shrouded and bowed in supplication. This pony, Paradise says, the dragon commands to travel to the mountain of the phoenixes and retrieve the jewel of Vista's description. Around the log ring, little furry snouts murmur discontentedly as they share the disquiet of the fictitious friends.
They back up at the said Arabian ponies who never have Vista.
Muses Galaxy, whose brow is furrowed and is stroking her furry red chin with thought as her blue chromatic gemmed eyes glint in the firelight. Paradise raises her hoofs to quieten the murmurs and goes on to explain that the third part of the plan, unshackling Vista, would have to wait. There is nothing that Vista or Mousefur could do, and the latter returns quietly as she can to Petalswirl once the coast is clear, tail between her legs, to explain the problem and to hide. At that high emotional moment, Paradise declares an interlude. 1, 2, 3...
Well done!
Well done! Masquerade and Paradise rise. The latter gestures to Danny and Lickety Split, the speaking roles, and they take places beside the two performers. Oh, I'd forgotten that I actually should have removed that. Ignore that. Megan approaches the actors, her eyes gleaming.
Wonderful story, Paradise. I feel so sorry for Vista, and you do such a good job of bringing everything to life, Masquerade.
The two pleased ponies both give her a friendly nuzzle, which, the inquisitive snouts find to their joy, discovers the toffee apples Megan was holding as a reward. The white and golden yellow Pegasi retire together to their log seat to munch on the apples, receiving many an appreciative pat as they pass.